Joke's on us, but the new Joker film actually looks pretty amazing. We can't believe it either. If you had told us a year ago that Joker was now at the top of our most anticipated films of the year, we'd have locked you in a room with only Jared Leto's scenes from Suicide Squad playing on repeat. But here we are, primed and ready to embrace Joaquin Phoenix's version of the Clown Prince of Crime. It seems silly now, but did you know this movie almost didn't happen? Today's video is all about how this underdog film defied all odds to get made, but ultimately might end up on top. Let's get into it right now. Can you imagine how difficult it must have been for Todd Phillips to pitch his Joker origin story to high-ranking executives? He wanted to make a hard R comic book film without a lot of ties to comic books, about the origin story for one of the most iconic villains of all time, whose whole thing was about having no definitive origin story. Yeah, try convincing a bunch of executives to greenlight that movie, especially when the pitch is coming from the guy best known for directing the Hangover trilogy. What would his superhero movie even be about? A bunch of drunk superheroes waking up and trying to figure out what happened during Batman's bachelor party? Okay, never mind, that actually sounds pretty awesome. But that's not the movie Todd Phillips wanted to make, and through sheer persistence and force of will, the director fought endlessly to get his movie made. And it's a good thing he had such a dedicated mindset to bringing this film to bringing this film to life, because the process seemed extremely difficult. Like, we're pretty sure Joker would have an easier time beating Batman than Todd Phillips had making this movie. The first thing that really made executives hesitant to greenlight this project was the content. Phillips was adamant about the R rating because, in case you didn't know, the Joker is kind of a messed up dude, but an R rating tends to limit the amount of money a film can make, which is why most studios love to operate in that sweet PG-13 pocket world, where nobody seems to bleed that much and you're only allowed one well-timed F-bomb. Only one? Well, Phillips obviously didn't want that for his Joker movie. If he was going to tell the backstory for one of pop culture's most disturbing villains, then he needed free reign to go dark. And you have to expect Warner Bros. Peeked over at Sony's Venom movie, a film many people wanted to be R-rated to do the character justice, but ultimately was given a family-friendly PG-13, and saw its $850 million box office, and at least considered making Joker a more relatable PG-13. Luckily, the one thing studio executives like more than PG-13 rated movies is a reasonable budget, and Phillips worked hard to keep his vision cost-effective. It's reported that the budget for the film is about $55 million, give or take a few bucks. And although that's more money than you or I will ever see in our lifetime, that's still a pretty good investment for a comic book film with a recognizable character front and center. Just for comparison, Aquaman had a budget of $200 million, and if you're willing to spend that much money on a shirtless Jason Momoa talking to fish, then $55 million for a Joker movie doesn't seem that far-fetched. And with such a modest budget, Phillips was able to follow his vision and finally tell the story he wanted to with the character. But of course, a Joker performance is only as good as the actor, and anyone stepping into the clown's probably oversized purple shoes had a lot to live up to. Heath Ledger defined the role of Joker for modern audiences, while there are still quite a few Jack Nicholson defenders out there. And of course, over on the animated side, Mark Hamill has created his own iconic version of the character as well. And Jared Leto? Well, he was fine if you like your Jokers tatted up and looking like they belong in Hot Topic. The point is, it's a major role to take on, and no matter which way you cut it, Phillips needed someone great if the movie was ever going to be a success. So our ears immediately perked up when we found out that Joaquin Phoenix would be our new Joker. And it's amazing that Phoenix signed on for the role given his history with comic book movies in the past. You see, in the industry there are actors and there are actors. And most of these actors tend to avoid the typical comic book movies, the huge popcorn franchises and the lengthy contracts that usually accompany those types of films. Phoenix in particular is known to be one of these types of actors, with most famously him turning down the role of Doctor Strange, a part that eventually went to Benedict Cumberbatch. I said that right? What would the MCU and Doctor Strange look like if Phoenix was our Sorcerer Supreme? The world may never know, but when offered the role of Joker, the story and the script and the opportunity was just too great to turn down. And it's not hard to see why. Although this is technically a comic book movie, Joker looks more like an intense character study and an examination of what drives a person insane rather than your typical quippy superhero slugfest. Phillips has even said how he was inspired by 1970s character studies when approaching this movie, which is an incredibly subversive way to examine a comic book film. So by foregoing normal superhero movie conventions, Phillips was able to get his twisted vision made with a great actor attached to star, which is something anyone should be proud of. But that's not the end of the story. During the actual production of the movie, strange cast and crew departures, along with some unsavory reports on the technical side of things, really made it seem like this movie was in danger of veering dangerously off the tracks. When the movie was first announced, it was stated that famed director Martin Scorsese was attached to produce the picture, which certainly turned a few heads, and raised many an eyebrow around the interwebs. Seeing the trailers for the film, now with its grit and crime-infused atmosphere, it's clear why they wanted Scorsese. But back in the early days of production, it was more of a head-scratcher. Why would Scorsese even be interested in this type of movie? But even that didn't last. It wasn't long before Scorsese apparently backed out of the project due to other obligations, which dealt a serious blow to the public perception about this movie. Having one of the most celebrated directors of all time involved with your movie? Well, that earns you some street cred. Having the director suddenly back out? Ooh, now we're back to being nervous. And Scorsese wasn't the only person involved with the project who was announced and then dropped out. We all know Thomas Wayne, aka Bruce's dad, aka Mr. Destined to Die in an Alley, will play a large part in the film and will be played by Brett Cullen. But that wasn't always the case. Headlines broke early in the film's production that Alec Baldwin was going to be playing the role of Thomas Wayne, but after just 2 days, Baldwin came out with a statement about how he actually dropped out of it due to a scheduling conflict. Was this project in such disarray that actors and creative minds were jumping ship this early? It was probably just coincidence that both Scorsese and Baldwin dropped out, but it did nothing to quell the fear that the movie was a disaster. Other elements painted the film in a bad light too. You know the phrase, all publicity is good publicity? Well, that wasn't the case with Joker. There was a story that broke early in the film's production where extras who were filming a scene inside a subway tunnel were trapped in the train for hours and had to pee on the side of the subway tracks. Not a great light to be in. That's something only a supervillain would do. Then Zazie Beetz, who plays the love interest Sophie Dumond in the film, revealed in an MTV interview that the script was constantly being rewritten during production, and every day she would go to Phillips' trailer for the lines and the scenes for that day. To paraphrase another great Joker, have one small issue during production, no one bats an eye, but have a consistent stream of problems and negative headlines? Then everyone loses their minds. This movie seemed dead in the water before we ever got to hear Joker's new laugh. But let's take a final moment to talk about the absolute biggest hurdle this movie faced during its production. And it's far more deadly than any Batman villain ever could be. It's public perception. Since the film was first announced, fans have been vocal about the confusing and unnecessary nature of a Joker origin story. For one thing, Warner Bros. Have been trying for years to make a cinematic universe to rival the MCU, but haven't seen the buckets of cash that Disney has seen. But when this film was first announced, it was labeled as a completely standalone feature, not connected to the DCEU or the worlds of DC or whatever Warner Bros. Wants to call it nowadays. That seemed counterintuitive to making a cohesive shared universe. To make matters even more confusing, there's already a Joker in the DCEU, and he has a fondness for fast cars, bling, and tattoos. Although Jared Leto's Joker didn't have much screen time in Suicide Squad, he was still being cemented as the new version of the Joker. So why would we have another version with a completely different actor exploring his origin story? And for some reason, Warner Bros. Must love making everyday people as confused as possible, because instead of keeping things clean, they went ahead and announced that Jared Leto would be getting his own solo spin-off movie as well. Now nothing's come from that announcement for a while, probably to instead focus on Harley Quinn's spin-off, but you could imagine we had two standalone Joker films within a year of each other telling different stories. There would be madness and chaos in the streets. Another big sticking point for some fans is why have a Joker origin movie at all? Some people would agree that Joker remains a fascinating agent of chaos specifically because he doesn't have a defined origin story. So why make a movie completely devoted to his beginnings? Aren't there other Batman villains to focus on that haven't had multiple iterations in the past few years? Where's our Mr. Freeze movie, dang it? The Joker's most well-known backstory stems from Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, which fleshed out a backstory where the failed comedian suffered one bad day and lost everything and therefore went insane. And that seemed at least the basis for the new Joker film, with Phoenix playing a failing stand-up comedian named Arthur Fleck who slowly goes insane. But even then, it's taking a lot of liberties with the character that most comic book fans aren't used to. But even after all the outrage, the hesitance, and the negativity, Phillips kept pushing forward. Although there was a ton of vocal opponents early on, the first trailer of the film silenced a lot of naysayers with its style and what looked like another transformative performance by Phoenix. It became immediately clear why Phillips wanted Martin Scorsese to executive produce, as the film's story and style looked eerily similar to Scorsese's underrated 80s flick, The King of Comedy. And that's absolutely a good thing. Could Phoenix become the second actor to win an Oscar for playing the Joker? It's still too easy to tell, but early reviews of the film have been extremely positive. It received an 8-minute standing ovation at the Venice Film Festival, and a few critics have said to already start engraving Phoenix's name on the Golden Award. But critics are only half the battle. How will the general public receive the film? Will they embrace Phillips' dark and gritty comic book film? Or will the subject matter prove too timely and uncomfortable for it to be a bona fide hit? We don't know what the long-term legacy of the Joker movie is going to be, or if it will kick off an age of dark R-rated villain movies, but no matter what, we respect Phillips for having a vision of what his movie is going to be, and not giving up until it was accomplished. It's quite an exciting time to be a Joker fan, and we actually can't wait to see how Phoenix stacks up compared to the other great Jokers of the past. How do you think Phoenix will do? Do you think this movie will be worth it? Or will its multiple production problems affect its final product? Be sure to let us know in the comments, and be sure to hit that subscribe button for more awesome comic book content. Thanks for watching.